Everyone in the city knew Dan Lee, the cold, untouchable CEO who never smiled, never dated, and never let anyone close. No one knew Eliza Ivy, the girl who accidentally walked into his world and was forced to stay. But if anyone had told her that the man who became her worst nightmare would one day ruin her for every other man, she would have laughed. Because on the day her life changed, Dan Lee didn't look like a man capable of love. He looked like a punishment she never asked for, a punishment she couldn't escape, a punishment she would eventually crave. The rain fell like knives the night Eliza Ivy's fate was rewritten. She clutched her bag tighter, soaked to her bones, hurrying across the marble lobby of Lee Corporations, a place that screamed power, wealth, and warning. Even her reflection in the golden elevator doors looked unsure, like she didn't belong here. Because she didn't. She had only come here to deliver one message to Dan Lee, one sentence, one decision. I'm rejecting the proposal. I can't marry you. It didn't matter that her father had made the arrangement. It didn't matter that Dan Lee was the richest bachelor in the city. She wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. But when the elevator opened on the 58th floor, she realized something. People didn't tell Dan Lee no. The air changed the moment she stepped into his office. It was huge, dark, and modern, more like a throne room than a workspace. A tall figure stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, sharp suit clinging to a body sculpted by discipline and dominance. He didn't turn. He didn't greet her. He just said, in a voice that felt like velvet cutting glass, "You're late." Her breath caught. She had met him twice before, brief meetings arranged by their parents, but something about him tonight felt different, colder, dangerous. "I came to talk about the engagement," Eliza said softly, her fingers trembling despite her attempt to sound brave. Finally, Dan turned. Her heart stuttered. He was breathtaking, strong jaw, dark eyes that could strip a person bare, wet black hair slightly tousled as if he had run a frustrated hand through it. The city lights behind him cast an almost predatory glow around his silhouette. And when he looked at her, it felt like he saw everything. Her fear, her uncertainty, her defiance. "Then talk," he said. She swallowed hard. This was it. "I'm rejecting it." His muscle and his jaw ticked, his gaze sharpened, darkened. "No," he said simply. Her brows knit. "You don't get to decide that. This is my life." Dan stepped toward her, every movement precise, controlled. Eliza instinctively stepped back. Big mistake. He noticed. "You don't know it yet, but marrying me is the safest decision you'll ever make." "I don't want safety," she whispered. "I want freedom." Dan stopped inches from her, close enough for her to see the rain drying on his collar, close enough for her to feel the raw power radiating off him. "You don't get to walk away," he murmured. Her pulse jumped. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me? You barely know me. You don't even like me." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, something restrained, something dangerous, something he wasn't willing to name. "Because I chose you," he said. "And when I choose something, I don't lose it." Her stomach twisted. "You can't force me." His voice dropped to a low command. "Eliza, you're marrying me." "I won't," she said, shaking. "You can't make me." He stared at her for a long, tension-filled moment. Then he exhaled slowly, almost disappointed. I tried to handle this gently. Gentle? Was he being serious? Before she could move, he lifted a sleek black folder from his desk and held it out. Your father's debt, he said coolly. All 3.8 million of it. Her world stopped. No, this couldn't. He opened the folder, official documents, signatures, bank records. It was real. Her father had been drowning silently, and Dan had been the one keeping him afloat. Her voice broke. Why didn't he tell me? Because he didn't want you to feel trapped, Dan said. But I do. A shiver ran down her spine at the way he said it. Too calm, too intentional. He placed the folder into her hands. I can erase this debt today, or your father can lose everything tomorrow. Her heart cracked. You're blackmailing me. No, he said quietly, stepping closer. I'm telling you the truth. You walk away, and your family falls. Tears pooled in her eyes. He reached out, slowly, surprisingly gently, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I don't want your tears, Eliza. His voice dropped softer, darker. I want your promise. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Her father's face, their tiny home, everything they had, and Dan Lee's unyielding gaze holding her hostage. I'll marry you, she whispered. The words tasted like surrender. Dan's eyes locked onto her lips just for a fraction of a second. Good, he murmured. He turned away, walking back towards his desk with that powerful, controlled stride, like a king returning to his throne. We marry in 7 days. Her breath hitched. 7? He didn't let her finish. 7 days. Eliza stood frozen, gripping the folder like it was burning her. Dan, she whispered, her voice splintering. Yes. He had the audacity to sound calm. He hated that. She hated the way her voice shook. She hated that she cared. Will you ever let me go? Dan looked over his shoulder, his expression unreadable, except for the quiet promise burning beneath the surface. No, he said. I won't.
Eliza didn't remember much of the 7 days that followed. Everything blurred. Signatures, fittings, documents, people whispering her name with pity or curiosity. She moved like she wasn't inside her own body, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Someone else being prepared for a marriage she never chose. But there was one thing she could never forget. Dan Lee watched everything. Always calm, always unreadable, always too close. And on the 7th night, she found herself standing inside a private penthouse suite, wearing a wedding dress that felt like a cage made of silk. The world outside celebrated the union of 2 powerful families. Inside, Eliza felt like she was walking toward a sentence. Her hands trembled as she touched the delicate lace. She didn't hear Dan enter, but she felt him. His presence always felt like a shift in gravity. She turned slowly, and there he was, in a black suit that looked carved onto him, hair smoothed back, expression carved from stone. Dan Lee didn't look like a man about to marry a woman. He looked like a man claiming one. His eyes dragged over her body, slow and assessing, the way a king might look at something he already owned. Eliza's breath caught. Don't look at me like that. He stepped closer. Like what? Like you're planning something. He stopped only a foot away, his voice low. I am. Her lips parted. Dan reached out and touched her veil, barely a graze, just enough to make her shiver. "You look terrified," he murmured. "I am." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. He tilted his head slightly. Not cruel, not cold. Just curious. "Of me?" he asked. Her pulse jumped. "I don't know what you want." A faint, unreadable smile crossed his lips. "You'll learn." Her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. "I don't want this marriage. You know I don't." Dan's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. A quiet, dangerous flicker. "You don't want it now," he murmured. "What's that supposed to mean?" "That desire," he said, voice dipping lower, "can change." Eliza swallowed hard. "Not for you. Not like this." His gaze locked on hers, sharp, dark, consuming. "Eliza," he said softly, "everything changes." A knock on the door snapped the moment apart, and Dan stepped back like he hadn't almost burned her with just his presence. "It's time," one of his guards said. Eliza's heart sank. The ceremony. It was small, private. Only close family, executives, a few powerful friends. But everything felt big, heavy, final. Dan stood tall, composed, flawless. Eliza tried not to shake as she walked toward him, her father beside her, face pale, eyes guilty, hand trembling against her arm. He whispered, "I'm sorry." She blinked back tears. "It's okay." It wasn't, but that didn't matter anymore. When she reached the altar, Dan's eyes found hers instantly. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. But something in his gaze pulled her in like gravity itself. The vows felt unreal, the words blurred, but she heard his voice, deep, steady, certain. "I do." Two words that sounded less like agreement and more like possession. Her turn came. Her throat tightened. Everyone watched. Dan watched. She whispered, "I do." Her voice cracked, but the contract was sealed. She was his wife. The aftermath. The moment the ceremony ended, cameras flashed, people clapped, glasses clinked. But Dan's hand never left her lower back. Warm, firm, unmoving. Guiding her, claiming her, controlling her. "Smile," he murmured in her ear. "I forced one." "Not like that," he added. "Then don't tell me how to—" He leaned closer, lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Wives don't argue on their wedding day." Her breath hitched. He straightened and offered his arm. She hesitated. His gaze sharpened. "Eliza." She took it, and his expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for her to see a hint of satisfaction. The wedding night. The penthouse was silent when they entered, too silent. Eliza's stomach twisted. Dan loosened his tie, his movements controlled, elegant, dangerous in their precision. "I made the room warm for you," he said without turning, unbuttoning his cuffs. Strange, gentle almost. "Thank you," she murmured. He paused, then looked over his shoulder, slow, intense. "I'll never hurt you, Eliza." Her breath froze. "But I won't let you run from me either." Her pulse fluttered wildly. Dan walked toward her, each step slow, deliberate, until her back hit the wall. "You're my wife now," he murmured. his hand bracing beside her head. I know. Good. His eyes dropped to her lips. Because this is real. He tilted her chin up with a single finger, and then a knock on the door shattered the moment apart, and Dan stepped back like he hadn't almost burned her with just his presence. Sir, there's an urgent issue. Dan closed his eyes, jaw ticking in frustration. He stepped back reluctantly, but his gaze stayed glued to her lips. This isn't over, he said softly. Something in her stomach flipped. Dan left the room, cold, controlled, furious at the interruption. The door clicked shut. Eliza pressed her hand against her racing heart. Her wedding night wasn't over. It hadn't even begun.
Dan didn't return for hours. Eliza waited in the massive penthouse bedroom, still wearing her wedding dress, hairpins half falling, veil tossed on the bed like a ghost of the girl she used to be. The room felt too big. She felt too small. Every passing minute made her chest tighten. Was this her future? A silent room and a husband made of ice? When the door finally opened close to midnight, Eliza stood quickly. Dan walked in. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like something had clawed at the steel walls he always kept around himself. His tie was gone, the first 3 buttons of his shirt open, his hair slightly messed as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes lifted to her and froze. "You're still awake," he said quietly. "You didn't tell me when you'd be back." Dan studied her for a long moment, her dress still on, the way she stood there nervously holding the fabric. "You didn't change?" he said. "Should I have?" He walked toward her slowly, each step measured. "Eliza," his voice dropped deeper, "you don't wait for me like this." Her breath caught. "I wasn't waiting for you." He stopped right in front of her, eyes burning into hers. "You were." Her cheeks heated. "I wasn't." He leaned closer, not touching, just close enough to make her forget how to breathe. "You're terrible at lying," he murmured. Her pulse spiked, and she looked away. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're exhausted. Go change." His voice wasn't cold now. It was something else. Something new. Something almost dangerous in its softness. The first morning. Eliza woke to sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she forgot she wasn't in her old room at home. She forgot the debt, the contract, the forced marriage, the cold CEO who now slept just a wall away. Until she turned her head and saw him. Dan stood by the balcony, already dressed, drinking coffee silently as he stared at the skyline. Morning light framed him, making his broad shoulders and tall frame look impossibly sharp. Her breath caught. He was unreal. He noticed her awake. Of course he did. "Good morning," he said. Not warm, but not cooled either. "Morning," she whispered. There was a plate waiting for her. Toast, fruit, eggs. Her favorite breakfast. She frowned. "Who made this?" "I had them ask your father. I didn't want you starting the morning with something you hate." She blinked. That wasn't something a man who didn't care would do. "Thank you," she said. Dan's gaze lingered on her face for a long, unreadable second. Then he set his cup down. "There are rules," he said. Her stomach tightened. "Rules?" she repeated. "Yes," Dan said quietly, stepping closer. This marriage needs structure. Of course, control. Everything with him was control. What kind of rules? She asked carefully. He stopped inches from her. Number 1, he said, voice soft but firm. You don't walk out of this house alone. Ever. Her eyes widened. Am I a prisoner? No. His gaze darkened. You're my wife. That's the same thing if you cage me. His jaw tightened. I'm not caging you. I'm protecting you. From what? From everything that might take you away from me, he said quietly. Her heart stopped. There it was, his truth slipping through the cracks. Dan, she whispered, shaken. He didn't look away. The first crack in his ice. Later that day, they went to a formal luncheon hosted by one of Dan's partners. Eliza hated every second. The whispers, the stares, the way people looked at her like she wasn't worthy of being Mrs. Lee. But what she hated most was how Dan listened silently as his partner's daughter, Kiera, touched his arm, flirted shamelessly, and stood too close. Eliza clenched her jaw. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe I shouldn't care. But something inside me burned. Dan noticed. Of course he did. He excused himself from the conversation and walked straight to her, hand sliding around her waist, pulling her into him possessively, public, bold, intentional. She stiffened. What are you doing? He leaned down, lips brushing her ear lightly, too light to be proper, too intimate to ignore. Claiming what's mine, he whispered. Her breath hitched. You don't get to touch me like that, she said through clenched teeth. Dan's voice had a low edge. Then don't look jealous. I wasn't jealous. His fingers pressed a little firmer on her waist. You were. She shoved his hand off and walked away. For the first time, Dan looked genuinely thrown. She didn't realize that her rejection, her walking away, was the first time in years anyone had done that to him, and it shook him. That night, the unexpected moment. Eliza changed into her pajamas and curled up with a book, trying to ignore the swirl of emotions inside her. Anger, confusion, heat she didn't want to feel. The door opened softly. Dan stepped inside, loosening his tie like he had a long day. He stopped when he saw her sitting in bed, legs tucked under her, soft hair falling over her shoulders. His expression changed. Slightly, but enough. You're avoiding me, he said quietly. I'm giving you space. I don't want space. Maybe I do. Dan walked to her slowly, too slowly, like he was approaching something fragile. When he reached the edge of the bed, he said nothing. He just sat down beside her, close, but not touching. For a man like him, that was intimacy. After a long silence, he spoke. Eliza, I married you for reasons you don't understand. She stiffened. You forced me. Yes, he admitted. No excuses, no denial. But I didn't do it because I needed a wife. She turned to him sharply. Then why? His jaw shifted. Silence. Heavy silence. She realized he wasn't refusing. He genuinely didn't know how to tell her. Her voice softened. Dan, talk to me. Slowly, finally, he looked at her. and something raw flickered in his eyes. "You're the only person I don't want to lose," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" whispered. Dan's fingers brushed her wrist lightly, barely a touch, but enough to send a shiver up her arm. "You make me feel," he murmured. Her pulse pounded painfully. "Dan." He leaned closer, not to kiss her, just to rest his forehead gently against hers. A fragile, broken, intimate touch. "I don't know how to be a good husband," he whispered. Her eyes softened, and without meaning to, she whispered, Maybe we can try together." Dan drew in a breath like her words hit him somewhere deep. He closed his eyes. For the first time, Dan Lee didn't look like a cold CEO. He looked like a man who was terrified of losing the one person who could destroy him.
Something changed after that moment, after Dan rested his forehead against hers and whispered truths he'd never given anyone. Eliza felt it. Dan felt it. Even the silence between them felt charged, alive. For days, there was a new tension, dangerous, electric, fragile. Dan wasn't softer. He wasn't suddenly gentle or open or romantic. He was still intense, still possessive, still infuriatingly controlled. But now, he tried. He watched her, listened to her, walked with her, ate with her. He didn't leave her alone in rooms anymore. He stayed close, too close, and Eliza hated how her heartbeat reacted every time he did. A new kind of distance. One evening, Dan returned late, very late. Eliza waited again, this time not because she had to, but because a strange part of her wanted to. But when he finally walked in, he wasn't alone. A stunning woman, tall, elegant, wrapped in a diamond-studded evening dress, walked in behind him. Eliza froze. Dan's eyes sharpened the moment he saw her standing in the hallway, small and shocked. "Eliza," he said. The woman looked her up and down with bored superiority. "Oh," she said, with a smile too sweet to be real, "this must be your little wife." Little wife. The words hit like a slap. Eliza's throat tightened. "Dan, who is she?" Before he could speak, the woman answered. "I'm Anya, Dan's friend." She emphasized the word as if hinting at something more. Dan's jaw clenched. "Eliza, go to the room." The command burned. "No," Eliza said quietly, "not until you tell me why you brought her here." Dan's eyes flashed with warning. Not anger, something sharper. "Eliza," he repeated, voice deeper, darker, full of a tension that coiled around her spine. "Go to the room." But she didn't move. And for the first time, Dan looked unsettled. Anya laughed, soft and cruel. "She's spirited. I see why you chose her." Dan shot her a look that could have frozen fire. "Anya," he said coldly, "get out." Her smile flickered. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Anya huffed and grabbed her clutch dramatically. "Very well. Enjoy your little domestic drama." When she was gone, the silence grew heavier. Dan ran a hand through his hair, something he only did when he was genuinely on edge. "Eliza, don't." Her voice shook. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child you can send away while you bring home a mistress." His eyes went black with emotion. Dangerous, possessive, not cold. "I don't have a mistress.
he said, low and rough. She acted wrong. You brought her here. Dan stepped toward her, every word sharp with restraint. I didn't bring her inside. Then why was she? Because I didn't want you to see us together. The words ripped out of him, louder, harsher, more raw than she'd ever heard him. Eliza's breath left her lungs. Dan rarely raised his voice. He was always controlled, composed, terrifyingly calm, but now he looked shaken. He looked scared. Eliza, he whispered, coming closer, but not touching her. I didn't want to hurt you. Her heart twisted. Why would it hurt me? He swallowed hard, and for the first time, Dan Lee, the cold, perfect, untouchable CEO, looked vulnerable. Because you're my wife, he said quietly. Something hot pulled painfully in her chest. She blinked back tears. You forced me to be. Yes, he whispered, but I want you to stay. Her breath trembled. Dan? He reached out and stopped. Just inches from her cheek. His hand hovered there, trembling with the effort of restraint. I can't touch you when you're angry. I don't want to take anything from you that you don't want to give. Her heart hit her ribs. Slowly, carefully, she leaned her cheek into his hand. Dan inhaled sharply. Eliza! Her name broke on his lips. Touch me, she whispered. His hand slid to her cheek, warm and desperate. He looked at her like something he'd been starving for. Don't ask me that, he said hoarsely. I don't have the strength to stop once I start. Her breath hitched. She didn't look away. Then don't stop. Dan stared at her for a beat, then another. His jaw clenched, his chest rose sharply, and then he pulled away. Suddenly, violently, like touching her burned him. Eliza gasped, hurt flooding her. Why? Dan turned his back to her, one hand on the wall, breathing hard like he was fighting himself. You don't know what you're asking, he said, raw. I won't take advantage of a woman who didn't choose this marriage freely. Her eyes widened. He was restraining himself for her. She stepped closer. Dan, please, he said, voice cracking, don't tempt me right now. Her heart melted painfully. I'm not tempting you. He turned to her slowly, and the look in his eyes was the most intensely beautiful and devastating thing she had ever seen. Everything you do tempts me, he said, barely a breath, and one day I won't have the strength to stop. Her breath trembled. Maybe I don't want you to stop. Dan stiffened. Eliza, he whispered, voice breaking, don't say things you don't mean. But she did mean them. Every word. She stepped closer, closer, until she stood inches away, her forehead nearly touching his chest. Dan sucked in a shaky breath. His hands curled into fists at his sides, desperate to touch her, but terrified to cross the line. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Tell me you don't want me. Eliza's lips parted. I can't, she breathed. Dan closed his eyes, pained, overwhelmed, undone. Eliza. She lifted a trembling hand and touched his chest. Slow, soft, like a promise she wasn't supposed to make. Dan's eyes flew open, hunger and emotion crashing together. Eliza, don't. His voice broke. Don't do this to me. What if I want to? She whispered. His breath hitched. His restraint snapped. Dan grabbed her wrist, not harshly, but with trembling desperation, and pinned it against his chest. His voice dropped to a low, shattered confession. You don't know what you're doing to me." "Then show me," she whispered. Dan's jaw tightened, his control fractured, his breath shook against her cheek. He leaned in, slowly, so slowly that every second felt like fire under her skin. "Eliza," he murmured. His lips brushed hers, barely, just a ghost of a touch that wasn't a kiss, but destroyed her anyway. Then he ripped himself away, literally stepped back, chest heaving. "No," he said, voice breaking. "Not like this. Not when you're still unsure." Her heart shattered. He wasn't rejecting her. He was protecting her. Protecting them. Dan's voice softened to a painful whisper. "When I finally kiss you, it won't be hesitant. It won't be unsure. And it won't be something you can ever forget." Her breath stilled. "Why?" He stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the heat of his body, but didn't touch her. "Because I'm already in deeper than I should be. And if I start, I'm never letting you go." Her heart pounded, her body trembling with emotion and longing. "Dan!" He turned away, because he had to, because one more second and he'd lose control. "Eliza," he said low and shaking, "go to bed." She didn't move. "Go," he repeated softer, "before I pull you into my arms and undo everything I've been trying to protect." Her knees weakened. "Please," he whispered, turning his head slightly, "don't make me cross that line tonight." Eliza stepped back, slowly, painfully, tears burning behind her eyes. Dan closed his eyes, relief and agony mixing on his face. And for the first time, Eliza realized.
The car rolled through the glowing city like it was carrying two people who had finally stopped fighting fate. Dan's hand rested on my thigh, light, warm, steady, almost as if he wasn't even aware of what he was doing. But I was. Oh, I definitely was. Every nerve in my body buzzed. The man who had dragged me into a marriage, the man who never smiled, the man who hid behind control and coldness, now looked at me like I was oxygen. We reached the penthouse. The elevator ride was silent, but filled with a tension so thick I could practically taste it, the kind that made breathing feel like a full-time job. When the doors opened, Dan didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, as if searching my face for any sign that I regretted what was unfolding between us. I didn't. God, I didn't. I stepped out. He followed. The penthouse lights blinked on automatically, casting soft, golden pools across the floor. I walked toward the window, needing air, needing space, needing something. Dan stopped behind me, close enough that his presence pressed against my back in a way that made my heart beat a wild, untamable thing. "Dan," he said quietly, my name in his voice, like a confession. I turned. For once, he looked unsure, vulnerable, human. "Tell me you want this too. Tell me I'm not imagining it." My breath caught. "Dan, he wallowed, "wanted anyone like this." My chest tightened, painfully tender. He came closer, his hand lifting but not touching, hovering, asking, waiting. I closed the gap. His breath left him in a shudder. His forehead rested against mine. "If I lose control around you, I'll never get it back. I don't want you to control anything." That was it. The last thread of restraint inside him snapped. His arms came around me, strong, certain, claiming without forcing. His lips found mine with a hunger he had probably been burying for months, and I melted, every defense, every wall, every fear dissolving under the heat of him. The kiss was everything, slow, deep, searching,
The kind that told stories without words. The kind that rewrote entire destinies. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing like we'd forgotten how. His voice was low, rough. I don't want just tonight. I don't want temporary. I want all of you. My heart stuttered. Dan, I thought you didn't believe in love. He brushed his thumb along my jaw, softer than I thought he was capable of. He said, I didn't, until a woman with fire in her eyes walked into my life and ruined every rule I lived by. Heat rushed to my cheeks. He took my hands. Eliza Ivy, I'm asking you honestly now. No pressure, no contract, no manipulation. His gaze locked onto mine. Stay with me. Choose me. Choose him. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. My voice shook. Dan, I already did. He exhaled, long, shaky, disbelieving, like those words were something he had secretly dreamed of, but never thought he'd hear. He pulled me into him, holding me like I was something precious, something irreplaceable. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, in someone. His lips found my forehead. Then let me love you the way I should have from the beginning. And he did. Slowly, deeply, without rushing anything, touching my face like it mattered, holding me like I was meant to be held, kissing me like each moment was a promise, not a demand, not domination, not coldness, not obligation, just us. Two people finally done fighting fate. Later, much later, we lay tangled in soft sheets, the city glowing outside like it had been waiting for us to finally figure ourselves out. Dan's hand lazily drew circles on my waist, every motion gentle in a way no one would ever believe of him. Dan, he murmured into my hair, will you move into this bed forever? A laugh bubbled out of me. Is that your way of asking me to stay? No. He tilted my chin up, his expression warm enough to melt me all over again. This is my way of asking you to be my wife again, this time because you want it. My heart stopped, then started, again, faster, softer, fuller. Yes, I said immediately. Yes, Dan. His smile, God, that rare, devastating smile, broke across his face like dawn. Good, he whispered, because I'm never losing you again. He kissed me, sealing the moment, the promise, the future. And just like that, the forced marriage became real, the cold CEO became mine, and I, Eliza Ivy, became completely, hopelessly, beautifully his. Forever.